September 2025 global crisis. For 72 hours, the question echoed across every news network, social media platform, and intelligence briefing room in the world. Where is Donald Trump? The man who had never missed an opportunity to dominate headlines, who tweeted through hurricanes and held rallies during pandemics, had vanished completely from public view. No statements from Mar-a-Lago, no Truth Social posts, no surprise appearances at campaign events. The silence was so absolute, so uncharacteristic, that it felt deliberate and deeply unsettling. The timing made everything worse. While America's most vocal political figure remained mysteriously absent, the leaders of America's greatest rivals were gathering in Astana, Kazakhstan, for an emergency session of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping, Narendra Modi, and Iran's President Pezeshkian sat at a massive round table, speaking of New World arrangements and post-Western global architecture. But it wasn't just the political optics that triggered alarm bells. In the skies above America, military aircraft were conducting flight patterns that hadn't been seen since the darkest days of the Cold War. At 14:20 hours on September 15th, civilian flight trackers recorded the takeoff of not one, but two E-4B Night Watch aircraft from different bases. These flying command centers, designed to maintain presidential command authority during nuclear warfare, rarely fly simultaneously unless the threat level has reached critical status. Each aircraft was accompanied by fighter escorts and aerial refueling tankers, configurations suggesting extended airborne operations. Amateur plane spotters with high-powered cameras captured images of these massive Boeing 747-based aircraft, their distinctive white paint schemes gleaming against storm clouds as they circled endlessly over the American heartland. This is Navy warfare. If you want to uncover the truth behind Trump's disappearance and what it means for global security, smash that like button and subscribe for exclusive political military analysis that goes deeper than mainstream media dares to go. The conspiracy theories began immediately and spread across social media platforms with viral intensity. The first theory claimed Trump had suffered a massive stroke or heart attack and was being kept alive artificially, while political operatives decided how to manage the transition. Supporters of this theory pointed to the sudden cancellation of 3 scheduled campaign events, each announced with increasingly vague explanations. They noted that Trump's last public appearance showed subtle signs of fatigue and disorientation that medical experts online claimed were consistent with neurological episodes. More disturbingly, they highlighted discrepancies in the medical reports released by his campaign, suggesting that vital signs and basic health metrics had been fabricated or artificially enhanced. The evidence they presented was compelling in its detail. Frame-by-frame analysis of his final public speech revealed momentary facial drooping, slurred syllables during complex words, and a slight tremor in his left hand that hadn't been present in previous appearances. Former White House medical personnel, speaking anonymously to conspiracy forums, claimed these symptoms matched patterns they had observed in aging political figures during their final months in office. The theory gained additional credibility when investigative journalists discovered that Trump's personal physician had made emergency visits to Mar-a-Lago on 3 separate occasions during the week preceding his disappearance. A second, more sinister theory suggested that Trump had been eliminated by deep state operatives fearful of his potential return to power. Proponents claimed that his disappearance coincided too perfectly with increased military readiness and the SCO summit to be coincidental. They argued that a shadow government was now operating from underground command centers while preparing for global conflict. This theory found support among audiences already suspicious of intelligence agency activities, particularly given the timing of several high-profile government whistleblower revelations that had emerged in preceding months. The deep state assassination theory gained momentum when researchers discovered unusual patterns in government contractor movements. Security firms with ties to intelligence agencies had increased personnel at several government facilities during the same 72-hour period. Financial analysts noted suspicious trading patterns in defense stocks and precious metals that suggested advanced knowledge of significant political developments. Most compelling were intercepted communications from government facilities that mentioned continuity of government protocols and executive succession procedures being reviewed and updated. The most extreme conspiracy theory proposed that Trump was already dead and had been replaced by sophisticated AI-generated content for months. Adherents analyzed recent videos for signs of digital manipulation, claiming that his recent appearances showed subtle inconsistencies in speech patterns, facial expressions, and even body language. They suggested that his disappearance was actually the moment the technology failed, forcing handlers to maintain silence rather than risk exposure. Expert video analysts, some with backgrounds in Hollywood special effects, provided detailed breakdowns of supposed digital artifacts in Trump's recent media appearances. This AI replacement theory drew support from rapid advances in deepfake technology that had made realistic video manipulation increasingly accessible. Conspiracy researchers pointed to minor inconsistencies in lighting, shadow patterns, and even the way Trump's clothing moved during various appearances. They claimed that certain phrases and gestures had been repeated across multiple events in ways that suggested algorithmic generation rather than natural human behavior. Some went so far as to suggest that the technology had been tested on other political figures, pointing to similar supposed anomalies in recent appearances by various world leaders. But the most compelling evidence for conspiracy theorists came from unprecedented military activities across the continental United States. Strategic Command Headquarters at Offutt Air Force Base showed unusual nighttime activity that exceeded normal operational patterns by several orders of magnitude. Satellite imagery revealed convoy movements involving specialized equipment, typically associated with continuity of government operations. Security perimeters had been expanded to include areas normally accessible to civilian personnel, and communication arrays were conducting 24-hour testing cycles that hadn't been seen since the 1980s. The underground facilities at Offutt, designed to survive nuclear attack, showed clear signs of preparation for extended operations. Power consumption data obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests revealed usage spikes consistent with full bunker activation. Supply convoys photographed by citizen journalists included medical equipment, communication systems, and most ominously, what appeared to be life support apparatus suitable for maintaining critical patients in underground facilities. At Cheyenne Mountain, the NORAD complex displayed similar patterns of unusual activity that suggested preparation for crisis operations. Additional security forces had been deployed from multiple military bases, creating the largest security presence at the facility since the September 11th attacks. Civilian contractors specializing in bunker construction and life support systems were documented entering the facility with equipment that suggested major system upgrades were being implemented under emergency protocols. Perhaps most alarmingly, civilian observers began documenting unusual submarine activity along both American coasts. Commercial shipping reported sonar pings and periscope sightings in areas typically empty of military traffic, suggesting that the normally invisible nuclear submarine fleet was positioning for maximum strategic coverage. Analysis of shipping lane disruptions and underwater acoustic patterns suggested that multiple Ohio-class ballistic missile submarines had departed their normal patrol areas and were positioning for maximum strike coverage of potential adversary targets. The nuclear sniffing aircraft added another layer of concern that elevated the conspiracy theories from speculation to genuine alarm. WC-135 Constant Phoenix planes, designed to detect atmospheric radiation signatures, were conducting extended patrols over both the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. These aircraft typically deploy only when intelligence agencies suspect nuclear weapons testing or fear radiological threats from hostile nations. Their presence suggested that someone, somewhere, was preparing for nuclear operations, or that intelligence agencies had detected concerning activities by foreign powers. Military aviation enthusiasts documented flight patterns that showed these radiation detection aircraft were not conducting routine training missions. Instead, they were following search patterns typically used during crisis situations when intelligence agencies suspect that nuclear materials may have been moved or when underground facilities are being prepared for weapons storage. The implications were terrifying for those connecting the dots between Trump's disappearance and the sudden activation of America's most sensitive nuclear detection capabilities. Meanwhile, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit continued with increasingly bold declarations that seemed designed to exploit America's apparent leadership vacuum. Putin spoke of irreversible changes in global power structures and announced military cooperation agreements that hadn't been discussed publicly before. Xi Jinping declared new, comprehensive strategic partnerships that would reshape international architecture in ways that directly challenged American global influence. Iranian President Pezeshkian went further, declaring that Western hegemony is ending and a new era of justice begins, while announcing closer military ties with both Russia and China. Behind closed doors, intelligence sources suggested the discussions included concrete military cooperation agreements that went far beyond anything previously contemplated by the organization. Joint exercises involving nuclear-capable forces were being planned across multiple time zones. Coordinated space warfare capabilities were being developed to challenge American satellite dominance. Most concerning were reports of shared cyber attack protocols that could simultaneously target American infrastructure, financial systems, and military communications networks. The implications were staggering for anyone analyzing the geopolitical situation. If the SCO evolved into a formal military bloc during America's apparent leadership crisis, it would represent the largest alliance opposing Western interests since the Warsaw Pact. Combined, the member nations controlled nearly half the world's population, significant nuclear arsenals, and critical energy resources that could strangle Western economies through coordinated sanctions and supply disruptions. Want to understand how military readiness indicators can reveal hidden political crises? Hit subscribe and the notification bell to stay updated on Navy warfare's exclusive analysis that connects political mysteries with military realities. Adding to the conspiracy atmosphere were reports of unusual Chinese military activities that suggested coordination with the timing of Trump's disappearance. Ballistic missile brigades in western China conducted live-fire exercises with DF-21 carrier killer missiles specifically designed to target American naval forces. Naval forces in the South China Sea increased patrol frequencies while conducting what appeared to be practice runs for blockade operations around Taiwan. Most concerning were satellite images showing increased activity at China's nuclear submarine bases, with multiple Type 094 ballistic missile submarines departing for what intelligence analysts believed were extended deterrent patrols. The Chinese activities extended beyond traditional military preparations. Cyber warfare units increased their activities against American infrastructure targets, probing electrical grids, financial networks, and government communication systems with unprecedented intensity. Chinese intelligence services activated sleeper agents throughout the Pacific region, suggesting preparation for information warfare campaigns designed to exploit American political instability. Iranian activities were equally provocative and seemed designed to test American resolve during the leadership vacuum. Revolutionary Guard Corps units conducted large-scale drone exercises simulating coordinated attacks on naval targets throughout the Persian Gulf. Ballistic missile units moved to forward positions along strategic choke points, including sites that could threaten civilian shipping and military vessels simultaneously. Intelligence reports confirmed that Iran was coordinating its activities with both Russian and Chinese military advisors, suggesting a level of cooperation that hadn't existed since the Cold War. The perfect synchronization of these events with Trump's disappearance fueled the most elaborate conspiracy theories that transcended simple political speculation. Some claimed that a secret agreement had been reached between major powers to eliminate American leadership while dividing global influence among themselves. Others suggested that Trump's absence was actually a cover for him to conduct secret negotiations from underground facilities, possibly including deals that would fundamentally alter America's global position. The most paranoid theories proposed that extraterrestrial or interdimensional forces were manipulating global events, using Trump's disappearance as a distraction while implementing a new world order that would benefit non-human entities. These theories, while lacking credible evidence, gained traction among audiences already predisposed to distrust official explanations and government institutions. They pointed to supposed UFO disclosures, unusual atmospheric phenomena, and alleged insider testimony from government employees as supporting evidence for otherworldly intervention. However, as the days passed and more information became available through careful investigation and analysis, a simpler explanation began to emerge that was far more mundane than global conspiracy or alien intervention. Political analysts noted that Trump's disappearance coincided with several significant legal challenges and negative news cycles that had been building for weeks. His silence began immediately after leaked audio recordings revealed potentially damaging statements about classified documents and his handling of sensitive government information during his previous presidency. Additionally, internal polling data that eventually became public showed declining support among key demographic groups that had previously formed the core of his political base. Focus group research indicated that voter fatigue with Trump's constant media presence was becoming a significant liability, with even supportive audiences expressing desire for less controversial messaging and more policy-focused communication. Campaign finance records, when finally released after legal challenges, showed that Trump's political organization had spent heavily on media consulting firms specializing in strategic communication management and crisis narrative reset. These firms had previously worked with major corporations facing significant public relations disasters, suggesting that Trump's team was employing sophisticated media strategies developed in the corporate world rather than traditional political consulting approaches. The most credible explanation for the military activities proved to be routine readiness exercises that had been planned months in advance as part of regular training cycles and equipment testing protocols. The E-4B flights were part of mandatory communication system testing required to maintain the aircraft's certification for emergency operations. Submarine movements reflected normal rotation schedules that placed vessels in position for their assigned patrol areas during quarterly deployment cycles. Even the increased activity at command bunkers could be explained by scheduled maintenance and upgrade programs that had been delayed by budget constraints and were finally being implemented during a quieter period in the political calendar. Military officials confirmed that the timing of these activities was determined by equipment availability and contractor schedules rather than political considerations or crisis preparations. The real story, according to veteran political operatives with decades of experience in campaign management, was far more mundane than global conspiracy or health crisis. Trump's team had likely calculated that temporarily stepping away from public view would allow negative news cycles to dissipate while building anticipation for his eventual return to the spotlight. The strategy, known in political circles as strategic silence, had been employed successfully by other controversial figures facing similar challenges to their public image. This strategic silence approach had several documented advantages for politicians dealing with negative media coverage. It forced news organizations to focus on other stories, allowing controversial topics to fade from public memory. It created anticipation for the politician's return, potentially generating more positive coverage when they re-emerged. Most importantly, it prevented the accumulation of additional controversial statements or actions that could compound existing problems. The military readiness activities, while real and documented, were coincidental rather than coordinated with political events. Career military officers confirmed that training exercises and readiness evaluations follow schedules determined by operational requirements, budget cycles, and equipment maintenance needs, rather than political considerations or civilian leadership changes. This is how information warfare and political strategy intersect with military posturing in the modern era. Subscribe to Navy Warfare and hit that bell icon for the latest analysis of how political communication strategies can inadvertently trigger global security concerns. Moreover, the SCO Summit, while significant for international relations and regional power dynamics, represented a continuation of existing trends rather than a sudden shift toward confrontation with the West. The member nations had been gradually increasing cooperation for years through trade agreements, joint exercises, and diplomatic coordination. Their declarations reflected ongoing strategic competition rather than preparation for immediate military conflict or coordinated action against American interests. Intelligence analysts noted that the language used in SCO declarations, while provocative, remained within bounds typical of international diplomatic posturing. The military activities described by member nations were largely defensive in nature and consistent with normal alliance building, rather than preparation for aggressive action. Even the most concerning developments, such as joint exercises and intelligence sharing, fell within patterns established by NATO and other Western alliances. As September progressed, Evidence mounted that Trump's disappearance was indeed a calculated political strategy, rather than a health crisis, assassination, or technological failure. Polling conducted during his absence showed gradual improvement in his approval ratings as negative news coverage decreased and public attention shifted to other topics. Focus group data indicated that voters were becoming more receptive to his messages when they weren't constantly exposed to controversial statements or actions that had previously dominated news cycles. The Great Silence had served its intended purpose with remarkable effectiveness. By stepping away from the spotlight during a period of negative coverage, Trump had allowed public attention to shift to other topics, while positioning himself for a dramatic return that would maximize media impact and political benefit. The strategy demonstrated sophisticated understanding of modern media cycles and public attention spans. On September 18th, Trump finally reappeared at a carefully orchestrated rally in Florida, emerging from his absence with a theatrical flair that generated maximum media coverage. His explanation for the absence was characteristically simple yet effective. Sometimes the best move is not to move. While our enemies gathered and plotted, I was planning, preparing, and getting ready to make America great again. Again. The statement perfectly captured his ability to reframe apparent weakness as strategic strength. The conspiracy theories gradually faded as normal political operations resumed, and the mundane reality of political strategy became apparent. The military aircraft returned to standard training schedules, the nuclear command fleet stood down from elevated readiness levels, and the SCO summit concluded with typical diplomatic language rather than declarations of war or coordinated action against Western interests. In retrospect, the entire episode illustrated how quickly conspiracy theories could proliferate in an information environment characterized by uncertainty, distrust of institutions, and rapid social media amplification. The combination of Trump's unprecedented silence, routine military activities, and an international summit had created a perfect storm of speculation that overshadowed more mundane realities and demonstrated the power of information gaps to fuel wild theories. The greatest lesson was perhaps the most obvious. In an era of constant communication and 24-hour news cycles, even brief silences could trigger global alarm and market volatility. The absence of information had become as powerful as its presence, capable of moving financial markets, influencing international relations, and shaping public perception of global stability in ways that previous generations of political leaders never could have imagined. Trump's strategic silence had succeeded in resetting his political narrative and improving his public standing, but it had also demonstrated the fragility of public confidence in an increasingly interconnected and rapidly changing world where political communication strategies could inadvertently trigger genuine concerns about global security and stability.